donkey in the face! Oh my god! Do another one.
4 years after 5-year-old Summer Wells vanished from her Tennessee home, an independent search team returned to Beech Creek with a drone, determined to look where no one else had. Their camera traced every ridge and creek bed the official maps had overlooked.
I lined up my flight path with the creek and started searching again. I saw a white object right when I started scanning the creek, but this turned out to be a large log next to a pile of sticks and branches. As I continued scanning the creek, I eventually spotted a black cylinder in the water. It looked tube-like, but from the air I couldn't tell if it was closed. I marked this spot off as one to hike into and check. After landing, I checked Google Maps and noticed a large wooded area and field behind Comfort Inn and Suites.
In that footage, a black cylinder half buried in water, an abandoned cabin showing signs of recent use, and secluded trails hidden behind no trespassing signs. Together, these images outline areas investigators never fully searched, places that could still hold answers. Today, we'll follow their lens, step by step, through every frame they captured. Because somewhere in those hills, beneath the silence, there may finally be something that explains what happened to Summer Wells. "4 years after 5-year-old Summer Wells vanished, a small independent search team returned to Beech Creek, not with shovels or cadaver dogs, but with a drone and a plan. Their objective was precise: to re-examine, not to speculate. While online theories spiraled through false timelines and unverified claims, these investigators went back to the ground itself, determined to document what had truly been searched, and what had not. Their footage changed the map of the case. From the air, the drone identified a black cylindrical object in the creek near Sullivan Gardens Parkway, a man-made tube partially submerged, mistaken at first for a barrel. It was empty, harmless, yet significant, proof that potential hiding sites still existed along waterways long declared clear. The team marked the coordinates, returned on foot, and confirmed it was a drainage pipe, but in doing so, they demonstrated how easily evidence could have been missed in the chaotic first weeks of 2021. The TBI had logged more than 5,000 search hours across 4.6 square miles, yet every official report admitted the same limitation: dense canopy, heavy foliage, poor visibility. The drone's lens revealed exactly why. The aerial view exposed a pattern. Creeks and feeder streams, once assumed fully covered, were bordered by thickets impossible to penetrate on foot. Entire corridors of Horse Creek and Ben Hill Road were visually inaccessible from the ground. In one sequence, the drone followed the creek's bend and discovered a narrow field divided by water, an open pocket invisible from the roadside. That single finding reframed how search grids were originally drawn, straight lines on paper laid across terrain that was anything but straight. The footage also documented a structure unknown to the public record: an abandoned cabin less than 2 miles from the gas station, where Candace Bly was seen around 5:30 p.m. on the day Summer disappeared.
Moving on to the abandoned cabin, it looked very interesting. Lots of debris and objects under the trees beside it and behind it, and no telling what might be found inside the building itself. I now had 2 target locations that were worth searching by foot.
The building, half collapsed and buried under vines, contained hay bales, potato sacks, and a plastic bottle used for waste. It showed clear signs of temporary shelter. The searchers found no biological traces, no smell of decomposition, but the scene mattered. It confirmed that people, travelers, drifters, or squatters, had occupied secluded properties in the Beech Creek corridor even after the initial investigation. Any one of them could have seen or heard something during those critical hours. Perhaps the most striking revelation came not from what they found, but from what stopped them: fences. Along Enterprise Place Road and the farmland behind Horse Creek Park, the team encountered locked gates and no trespassing signs. Much of the ground adjacent to the original search zone was privately owned, making it legally off-limits to law enforcement unless consent was given. These boundaries created what investigators call search gaps, areas omitted from systematic sweeps because of property restrictions. The drone's footage made those blind spots visible for the first time, outlining tracts of woods that, by all available data, had never been physically entered by official teams. In forensic terms, this is the quiet power of aerial evidence. It doesn't solve a case directly, but it redefines the parameters of what's possible. Each still frame from that flight challenges the assumption that Beech Creek was exhaustively searched. It wasn't. Not geographically, not logistically. The combination of terrain, ownership, and time created a perimeter of uncertainty, and the drone carved into that perimeter, exposing its flaws. Topographically, Beech Creek sits inside a basin of the Appalachian foothills. The terrain folds inward, producing deep natural pockets that trap sound and moisture. In June 2021, heavy vegetation would have swallowed any small object within hours, even with search dogs and helicopters. Line of sight coverage was limited to less than 30% of the total area. What this drone team achieved, years later, was a reconstruction of that limitation, a visual audit of what investigators were up against. Their conclusion was understated but critical. Not all of Beech Creek has been seen from above, and much of it remains unseen from below. It is a statement of fact, not theory. And it shifts the investigation's focus away from personalities and back to geography. The one witness that never lies. Viewed through that lens, the Summer Wells case isn't just a missing child mystery. It's a case study in how terrain dictates truth. The footage doesn't exonerate or accuse anyone, but it does expose a logistical failure. When the land itself becomes a suspect, every oversight matters. The creek, the cabin, the fenced fields. Each is a reminder that physical evidence can exist inches from discovery and remain invisible for years. For the families who still watch the hills from their porches, the drone's hum became a different kind of searchlight, not the roar of helicopters from 2021, but a quiet, deliberate return to facts. In that silence, the case breathed again. Because when the eyes in the sky came back to Beech Creek, they didn't find closure, they found unfinished work. And when the drone's lens turned toward the ground, it wasn't just tracing the hills. It was tracing the last known movements of the one person who was with Summer that afternoon, Candace Bly. At 5:30 p.m. on June 15, 2021, a small gas station on the edge of Beech Creek became one of the most critical and most misunderstood locations in the Summer Wells case. A woman matching the description of Summer's mother, Candace Bly, was reportedly seen there that evening, the same day her daughter vanished. The sighting itself isn't disputed. The confusion comes from where it happened. For years, hundreds of videos, posts, and podcasts have pointed to the wrong place, the Sistine Claire convenience store, several miles away. The truth, verified through local footage and independent mapping, is that Candace was at a different station entirely, one much closer to Ben Hill Road and the Beech Creek corridor. That single correction matters more than it seems. The St. Clair claim has dominated the online narrative since 2021, spawning a chain of false assumptions that Candace was far from home, that she lied about her location, that she had time to hide something. But when the coordinates are corrected, those arguments collapse. The real store sits just off the main route she often used for errands. The distance to her home is roughly 20 minutes. That means her being seen around 5:30 p.m. fits easily within the timeline she gave police, arriving home, watching her son's plant flowers, then noticing Summer missing before calling 911 around 6:30. Still, even with the geography clarified, the timestamp remains loaded with questions. 5:30 p.m. is the last confirmed window before the disappearance was reported, what investigators quietly call the 30-minute void. Every theory in this case, official or civilian, depends on what did or didn't happen during that span. When agents reconstructed the timeline, they compared 3 sets of data: Candace's phone activity, the cellular range around Ben Hill Road, and the few known witness statements. Though much of that data remains sealed, small details leaked through official briefings. At least one call was made near that time. Signals placed her in the Beech Creek area, not across the county line. Yet GPS precision in that rural region is notoriously unreliable. A ping can drift hundreds of meters, enough to place a user near the creek or near the store. depending on how the tower split its coverage. This uncertainty fuels three main hypotheses. 1. Candace left home with Summer. Under this scenario, both mother and daughter traveled to the gas station or nearby roads, perhaps to pick up groceries or call a friend. The key point, if Summer was with her, that 5:30 sighting could be the last independent confirmation that she was alive. No CCTV image of the child has ever been released, though locals have long speculated there may be private cameras near the store's parking lot. If one exists, even blurry, it could change the entire framework of the case. 2. Candace left home alone. This theory assumes Summer remained at the house while her mother ran a brief errand. It aligns with the timeline Candace described, being home within minutes, then realizing her daughter was gone. Critics argue that even a 10-minute absence could have opened a window for abduction or accident. Supporters counter that Beech Creek's isolation makes a random kidnapping improbable without prior observation. 3. Candace was being watched without knowing it. Perhaps the most chilling possibility is that someone else was monitoring the family. A neighbor, a passerby, someone familiar with their routine. In this version, the sighting doesn't reveal Candace's movement, it reveals the observers. If that person noted her location at 5:30, they knew exactly when the house stood unguarded. Each theory orbits around the same gravitational center, the gap between 5:30 and 6:30 p.m. That single hour has become the hinge of the investigation, a void filled by speculation but starved of proof. The drone team who later searched Beech Creek understood this perfectly. They began their flights near that same gas station, tracing outward like ripples from a stone. To them, the store wasn't gossip material, it was geography, the last fixed coordinate before everything vanished into guesswork. Their decision to scan a 1-mile radius wasn't random. It came from a practical observation. If a child were moved by vehicle or on foot from that area in the summer heat, the easiest concealment points would lie along creeks, behind businesses, or beyond locked fences. Their aerial footage confirmed how quickly the land swallows distance. From the gas station to the first dense tree line is less than 2 minutes by car. Inside the investigation, this 5:30 window also defines motive and opportunity. If Candace's account is accurate, her movements were ordinary, a quick stop, a drive home. If it's incomplete, it may conceal a lapse of judgment or an event too painful to state. Detectives have publicly said neither Candace nor her husband Don has been cleared, but they've also said no one has been charged. The ambiguity keeps the timeline alive, flexible, unsettled, dangerous. Meanwhile, misinformation online keeps redrawing the scene. The St. Clair myth persists because it serves narrative convenience. A distant location implies deception. But the facts pull in the opposite direction. The correct store sits within the same daily loop Candace often traveled, to pick up milk, cigarettes, or phone cards. Residents confirmed seeing her there in prior weeks. That pattern matters. Criminals often exploit familiarity. If anyone planned to intercept Summer, they might have predicted exactly which route Candace would take that afternoon. When investigators revisited the store months later, they faced another obstacle: time. Surveillance systems in rural gas stations typically overwrite data every 30 days. By the time the case drew national attention, the crucial footage was long gone. The only record that remains is the human memory of those who were there, and memory, especially under pressure, distorts easily. Yet one detail from the original witness still resonates. Candace appeared in a hurry. She wasn't frantic, but focused, the kind of movement that suggests an errand already running late. That description aligns with her own statement that she was juggling chores, caring for her mother, and watching the kids. If accurate, it implies no malice, only fatigue. But if wrong, it suggests concealment, haste for a reason not yet told. For the drone team, the meaning of this stop transcended guilt or innocence. It was the pivot point where documented reality ended and rumor began. They called it the hinge moment, the intersection between what cameras once captured and what stories later invented. The 5:30 sighting therefore stands as the case's final verified footprint before the trail breaks. From a narrative view, the gas station is the threshold of the story, the place where confirmed evidence fades into uncertainty. A camera mounted above the pumps may have watched the last unrecorded minutes of a child's life. The irony is that no one realized its importance until years later, when a drone retraced the same airspace, trying to fill the silence that started there. The footage doesn't accuse Candace Bly. It recenters her within the timeline she never escaped. Whether she left alone, with her daughter, or under someone's unseen gaze, the gas station remains the boundary between what can be proven and what can only be believed. And from that boundary, a single road winds back toward Ben Hill Road, twisting through creeks, pastures, and wooded slopes. From that gas station, the road into Beech Creek curves through hills, streams, and silent woods, the very places the drone team would search next. When the 2025 search team mapped the Beech Creek Valley, their goal wasn't to revisit what had already been done, it was to verify what hadn't. 4 years of distance had distorted the picture of where investigators actually looked. The drone data stripped that illusion away and revealed something unexpected. The disappearance of summer wells is as much a problem of topography as it is of truth. Ben Hill Road is not a simple country lane. It snakes across 3 elevation levels before meeting Little Horse Creek, forming a pocketed basin invisible from any single angle. From the air, the team saw how that layout naturally conceals movement. The Wells home sits on higher ground, but the terrain drops sharply just a few hundred yards downhill. Once someone steps past that slope, they vanish from sight. No fence, no obstruction, just the shape of the earth itself. The 2025 footage shows the pattern clearly. The creek system isn't a single path of water, it's a lattice of rivulets that carve through dense vegetation, before merging again near Sullivan Gardens Parkway. In June 2021, that area would have been almost impassable. But even in autumn 2025, with leaves thinning, visibility from the ground remained close to zero. The drone's altitude offered the first continuous view of that corridor, a continuous thread linking the Wells property, the highway, and the outer commercial zone. That connection matters because it defines opportunity. If Summer left or was moved from the Ben Hill property, the most direct escape routes are along these same natural channels. They bypass main roads and lead straight toward Horse Creek Park and the Comfort Inn Ridge. It's not speculation, it's logistics. The drone traced those lines and proved that geography alone provides concealment better than any plan. Further west, Horse Creek Park appears calm and open, but its edges tell another story. Beyond the playgrounds and mowed grass, the ground drops into a flood basin, a shallow depression fed by storm runoff. This wasn't included in the 2021 ground search because the water level was high at the time. In 2025, with lower rainfall, the team could finally see its contours. It's a natural sink, flat, wide, and soft enough to swallow heavy debris. It's not evidence, but it's terrain that investigators might need to test again. The Comfort Inn sector is perhaps the most revealing. The hotel sits on the edge of a hill, with Enterprise Place Road curving behind it. On paper, that area is commercial. On camera, it's something else entirely, a stretch of second-growth forest covering a slope that drops toward the creek. What stands out isn't what's in the footage, but what's not. No tire marks, no walking paths, no signs of regular access. The drone's imagery suggests this hillside has remained untouched since before 2021. That's where the abandoned cabin was found, its roof visible only from above. Inside, hay and feed bags indicate it was once used as storage or shelter. Whether that structure existed during the initial search remains unconfirmed, but its proximity, less than 2 miles from the Wells property, makes it relevant. What the drone captured across these 3 sectors, Ben Hill, Horse Creek, and Comfort Inn, is a consistent flaw in how missing person searches are visualized. Search grids look precise on paper, but the ground in Beech Creek doesn't match the map. The elevation shifts constantly. Every 100 meters, terrain either rises sharply or collapses into a gully. It's impossible to maintain a straight search line. When the team overlaid the 2021 grid on new satellite data, the gaps were immediate. Dozens of cleared sections were physically unreachable without ropes or water gear. Even without new objects or clues, those findings matter. They redefine what searched actually means. For investigators, the problem isn't manpower, it's perspective. From eye level, this landscape hides itself. From above, its logic becomes visible. How the creek creates barriers, how slopes distort sightlines, and how private property divides the valley into isolated pockets of land. The Comfort Inn woods illustrate this perfectly. Just beyond the last row of parking spaces, the drone recorded a sharp vertical cut, 20 feet down into brush. No fence, no warning, just a hidden drop. It's a small detail, but one that explains why aerial units in 2021 might have misjudged the scale of the search area. What looked like continuous terrain from helicopter height was, in reality, a patchwork of disconnected basins. The team's analysis concluded that the Beech Creek corridor doesn't just delay discovery, it actively resists it. Water, vegetation, and property lines combine to create what investigators called a natural archive, a place that holds everything but refuses to reveal it. Every time the land floods, it rearranges itself, burying and resurfacing debris. Every season rewrites the surface. By the end of the survey, the drone operators had mapped more than 200 points of interest. None constituted evidence of a crime, but together they revealed the limits of the official timeline. Beech Creek is not static. Every search done here expires the moment it ends. If law enforcement ever restarts field operations, this new mapping data could be the foundation. It doesn't accuse anyone, it simply redefines the battlefield. Because in Beech Creek, the real opponent isn't a person, it's the land. And in that maze of slopes and streams, the drone finally caught something that made everyone pause. A dark object drifting in the shallow creek, half buried, out of place, and waiting to be identified. On the second afternoon of the 2025 search, the drone operator slowed his flight over Little Horse Creek, letting the camera drop lower than usual. The light was fading, the water turning from brown to black under the shadows of the trees. That's when something unfamiliar appeared, a cylindrical shape, dark and smooth, wedged against a pile of branches. It wasn't shaped like the logs scattered nearby. It was too symmetrical, too clean. In the raw footage, the operator's voice caught a note of surprise. That's not a barrel, it's a tube. The team marked the coordinates and hiked in on foot. Up close, the black cylinder turned out to be a large piece of PVC pipe, partially buried in silt and filled with water. There was nothing inside, no fabric, no metal, no biological trace, just debris trapped by the current. It was a dead lead. But for the investigators, it wasn't meaningless. It proved a point they had suspected since the start. Artificial objects disappear easily in Beech Creek. They don't stand out. They blend into nature, until even trained eyes mistake them for part of the landscape. The discovery raised a practical question that goes far beyond this single case. If a bright white plastic tube could darken, sink, and become indistinguishable from a log in just a few seasons, then how many other things, a shoe, a bag, a piece of clothing, might be hiding in plain sight, camouflaged by time? Little Horse Creek, as the drone footage shows, is the perfect environment for that kind of concealment. It's slow-moving, lined with clay, and filled with stagnant pockets where silt accumulates rather than washes away. The water is shallow but murky, a mirror that hides more than it reflects. Every flood rearranges the debris field, shifting branches and covering surfaces with a new layer of mud. Forensic specialists who later reviewed the video agreed a lightweight object could rest here for years without resurfacing. This isn't speculation. Cases across the U.S. have proven it. In the disappearance of Madalena Kojokari in North Carolina, investigators initially dismissed a drainage ditch near the property as cleared. Months later, maintenance workers found personal items downstream after heavy rain flushed them out. In the case of Harmony Montgomery in New Hampshire, a metal barrel retrieved from a shallow river was initially overlooked because it looked like standard industrial waste. And in the 2022 Fort Worth Cold Case Review, police recovered a missing woman's keys from a creek bed 6 years after the original search, wedged under a log that had been cataloged dozens of times in drone imagery. The pattern is clear. Natural water systems distort visual evidence. Anything round, dark, or partially submerged becomes part of the background. When the Beech Creek team found the black tube, they realized it wasn't just a coincidence, it was a demonstration. In terrain like this, nothing found doesn't mean nothing there. In the lab, search technicians refer to this as hydrological masking, When silt, water, and organic material create optical camouflage, it's the same reason sonar scans in shallow rivers often fail. The bottom changes faster than the imaging frequency. A pipe, a shoe. Even a child's toy can vanish under a half-inch of sediment and remain invisible to both thermal and visual detection. For Beech Creek, this has serious implications. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation logged more than 5,000 hours of active searching, including dive teams and sonar in nearby rivers. Yet the 2025 imagery shows how much of Little Horse Creek, the shallow, irregular sections, were simply skipped. Dive units can't operate safely in water that's shallow and unstable. Ground teams can't see below the surface. That leaves a whole category of terrain that's neither land nor water, liminal space, the kind that defeats both approaches. The drone's video of the black cylinder captures that liminal zone perfectly. A dark object, half in the creek and half on land, half natural and half man-made. It's the kind of detail that police reports can't categorize, but the kind that civilian searchers, unhindered by bureaucracy, are free to pursue. When the team extracted the pipe, they filmed the entire process, clearing branches, slicing through vines, and finally lifting the object free. It was heavier than expected, filled with mud. Inside, there was only water. Yet that moment, the physical act of retrieving it, revealed something that no official document had ever stated outright. The Beech Creek area had never been fully cleared by hand. The searches that once filled headlines were conducted primarily by aerial grid and perimeter walkthroughs. Very little of the actual ground, especially along the creek lines, had ever been disturbed. The pipe's discovery also reopens a quieter question about interpretation. In the rush of a large-scale investigation, what defines a suspicious object? The drone team noted that from altitude, the cylinder's smooth texture was a visual anomaly, but one easily dismissed as a natural feature without context. Multiply that by hundreds of square miles of terrain, and it's easy to see how an early search could have flown directly over similar shapes without logging them. By now, the footage has been analyzed frame by frame. Forensic mapping software identified at least a dozen similar objects, small, dark, elongated, scattered along the creek and nearby drainage ditches. Most are likely logs or erosion pipes, but the fact that they exist, unnoticed in earlier data, reinforces the same conclusion. This environment hides more than any single search can reveal. Even if nothing criminal ever emerges from those coordinates, the black cylinder has already changed the framework of the case. It redefines possible evidence to include the things that don't fit expectations. It reminds searchers that an answer in Beech Creek won't announce itself. It will have to be separated from the landscape, one false lead at a time. And so, after hours of clearing mud and marking coordinates, the team packed up their gear. The creek went quiet again, as if nothing had ever been there. The footage would later circulate online, not as proof of discovery, but as proof of persistence. After leaving the water, the team turned toward another kind of darkness, not beneath the creek, but beneath the rotting roof of a forgotten cabin. After the creek search, the drone team followed the tree line west, toward a slope hidden behind Enterprise Place Road. That's where the lens first caught it, a rectangular roof barely visible through the branches, its metal panels corroded but intact. The shape was unmistakable, a small abandoned cabin sitting deep in the woods, less than 2 miles from Ben Hill Road. It didn't appear on property databases or official search records. In a case where every mapped structure had already been inspected, an unlisted building this close to the primary area was worth attention. They returned on foot. The approach wasn't difficult. The trees were thin in autumn, and animal paths led straight to the clearing. The cabin stood on a concrete foundation surrounded by farm debris, tires, rusted barrels, wire fencing, and an old hay trailer half buried in soil. It looked like part of a farm complex that had been abandoned for years, but not decades. Inside, the air was heavy and dry. The interior told its own story: stacks of hay, burlap feed sacks, and a single plastic bottle used as a toilet. The ground was layered with straw and compacted dirt, as if someone had slept there more than once. It wasn't vandalized, and there were no signs of recent fire or food packaging, which suggested brief, temporary use. Whoever stayed here likely came for shelter, not residence. The most curious feature was the flooring. Toward the back, the dirt gave way to concrete. When tapped, it echoed slightly, hollow underneath. The operator noted the sound on camera. That's not solid. There's space under here. They suspected a sealed well or old storage pit, common in barns across rural Tennessee. The edges of the slab showed small gaps where water had eroded the soil. Using a flashlight, they peered through one of the cracks. The void below was narrow, no more than a few feet deep. There was no smell of decay, no animal remains, no sign of disturbed soil. Still, it was enough to justify documentation. The team marked the coordinates and returned later with a metal probe to test depth. The cavity ran only about 3 feet down, too shallow for a well. It was, most likely, the remnant of a feed cellar or tool pit, standard in older farm outbuildings. That conclusion didn't make it irrelevant. What mattered wasn't what they found, but what it proved. This part of Beech Creek, long assumed untouched, had experienced human presence after the original investigation ended. The discovery shifted the focus from speculation about suspects to something more tangible: activity. Someone had been here. Maybe a drifter, maybe a hunter, maybe a person who didn't want to be seen. In an area still associated with an unsolved child disappearance, that fact alone complicates the timeline. Every human footprint left after June 2021 becomes noise that blurs the signal investigators are still trying to isolate. From a forensic standpoint, the cabin site illustrates how secondary contamination occurs in cold cases. When people occupy or alter an area that might contain evidence, they unintentionally destroy or overwrite potential clues. Even footprints or cigarette butts that appear recent can reset forensic expectations. In this case, the traces of habitation, hay matted into the ground, the bottle, the disturbed soil, confirmed that Beech Creek's outer ring isn't static. It changes every time someone crosses it. There's another layer to the cabin's significance. Local residents told the drone team that the hillside used to hold several farm outbuildings connected to a single property. Most had collapsed or been dismantled before 2020. This one, however, survived. Its condition suggests it remained structurally sound well past the time of Summer's disappearance. That raises a quiet but important question. Was it there in June 2021? And if so, was it ever searched? No public record indicates that it was. The TBI's official search summaries mention barns and outbuildings near the Wells property, but none this far down the slope. The omission likely comes down to ownership. By the time the main search began, this parcel had already changed hands twice. Without clear permission, law enforcement couldn't enter. The result: an unsearched structure located inside the 3-mile radius of the disappearance zone. In interviews after the footage was released, retired search coordinators acknowledged the challenge. Every no trespassing sign creates a hole in the grid, one said, and holes add up. The cabin filled one of those holes, but the question remains, how many others are still out there? The hollow beneath the concrete slab also raises a broader issue: subsurface concealment. Rural structures in Tennessee often feature unmarked wells, root cellars, or septic pits. Many are shallow, sealed, or collapsed, but they complicate any recovery effort. Cadaver dogs can't detect through sealed concrete. Ground-penetrating radar often misreads voids as natural soil pockets. The only reliable method is excavation, a process rarely approved without probable cause. In Beech Creek, that limitation means entire layers of terrain remain unchecked. The cabin's concrete echo, though harmless here, represents hundreds of similar sounds across the valley, potential voids, each one an unanswered question. Yet even stripped of mystery, the site still matters. It confirms that Beech Creek wasn't abandoned after the searches stopped. People returned. They camped, hunted, explored, and maybe slept in places investigators had written off. Every such visit can reshape the forensic landscape. If any trace of Summer once existed here, secondary activity could have buried it beyond recognition. That reality tempers the meaning of evidence. In 2021, absence meant nothing was found. By 2025, absence might mean what was once there has been replaced by time, by weather, or by people just trying to survive. Still, the human traces left behind, the hay bedding, the feed sacks, the improvised toilet, suggest someone saw this cabin as a refuge. Maybe a transient, Maybe a neighbor avoiding notice. Whoever it was, they knew the place existed when almost nobody else did. Could that person have been nearby in June 2021? Could they have heard something? The echo of a shout, a vehicle, a call for help. Those are the questions that follow every unregistered structure in a missing person case. The drone team can't answer them, but they made sure the cabin is no longer invisible. The video of the search ends quietly. One of the men walks the perimeter with a flashlight, tapping each corner post. The light glints off rusted nails and fragments of glass. No sound but crickets, no smell of decay. Just the empty echo of a space that once held life, human, animal, or both. They sealed the area, logged coordinates, and left it for official review. The footage, later analyzed frame by frame, confirmed that the structure posed no immediate forensic value, but its existence proved something else. Beech Creek's story isn't just about who vanished. It's also about who kept returning. If an abandoned cabin can shelter the unnoticed, what could be hiding behind the countless no trespassing gates scattered across these hills? When the drone team overlaid their 2025 survey on the original TBI grid, one feature stood out immediately. The boundaries weren't drawn by rivers or ridges, they were drawn by property lines. The edges of the official search matched the edges of private land, not the logic of the terrain. It wasn't coincidence. It was law. Around Comfort Inn, Horse Creek Park, and the western edge of Enterprise Place Road, vast tracts of woodland and pasture were marked. Private property, no trespassing. Some were gated with barbed wire, others fenced off with steel signs that had faded over years of sun. In Tennessee, those two words, no trespassing, carry the full weight of the law. Unless there's probable cause or an immediate threat to life, neither police nor search teams can legally enter without consent from the landowner. In a missing child investigation, that legal line can mean the difference between searched and off-limits. The 2025 drone imagery confirmed what volunteers had long suspected. Several parcels within a 3-mile radius of Ben Hill Road had never been physically checked. They weren't ignored out of neglect. They were legally inaccessible. The drone's flight logs marked multiple instances where the camera passed over fenced terrain and recorded clearings, small barns, or vehicles parked deep inside, none of which appear in any 2021 search summary. This is the paradox at the heart of the Beech Creek case. Law enforcement can search public land endlessly, but private property remains sacred ground. Even in emergencies, consent must be obtained, and that process is slow. In 2021, TBI agents reportedly sought cooperation from over 50 landowners in Hawkins County. Many allowed entry, some refused. Others simply couldn't be reached. Time passed, leads cooled, and the grid froze in place. By 2025, ownership had changed again. Several parcels near Horse Creek had been sold to out-of-state buyers. When the drone team attempted to contact one owner for access, they received no reply. Another parcel near the Comfort Inn Woods, where the abandoned cabin stood, showed signs of new fencing, erected sometime after the original searches. The irony is painful. The longer a case remains unsolved, the more the land itself becomes inaccessible. In professional search terminology, this gap has a name: the search void. It's the cumulative area left unexamined due to physical, legal, or logistical barriers. In Beech Creek, that void now covers an estimated 1.6 square miles, roughly 1/3 of the initial investigation zone. It includes dense forest behind Horse Creek Park, undeveloped slopes behind commercial properties, and private fields bordering the main highway. To understand why that matters, consider how disappearance timelines work. If someone wanted to hide evidence, a phone, clothing, or worse, they would need two things: seclusion and control. Private land offers both. Locals know that sheriff's deputies and search teams stop at the fence line. In rural Tennessee, that's not paranoia, it's expectation. Generations of property rights have made boundaries untouchable. Even with drones, investigators can observe but not enter. It's not just a theoretical problem. The same dynamic slowed other investigations across the country. In the Oakley-Carlson case in Washington state, large sections of wooded acreage near the family's property were never searched because owners declined permission. In the Suzanne Morphew disappearance in Colorado, cadaver dogs stopped short of a private mining claim, the area where evidence was later recovered years after the fact. Every jurisdiction faces the same legal wall. The Constitution protects property before suspicion. In Beech Creek, that legal wall becomes literal. The drone footage shows it: gates chained shut, warning signs nailed into trees, driveways blocked by brush. Behind one fence near the Comfort Inn, the team noted the outline of a metal shed and a small clearing, possibly a hunting blind or storage site. From the air, it looked abandoned. From the ground, there was no way to know. Without consent or a warrant, the site remains untouched. The paradox deepens because the same conditions that protect privacy also protect potential evidence. If the person responsible for Summer's disappearance had even a basic understanding of the area, they'd know where the lines fall, where police can't cross without paperwork. Hiding something within private boundaries doesn't require intelligence, only familiarity. That's what makes rural investigations uniquely fragile. The perpetrator doesn't have to outsmart investigators, only outlast the process. Legal experts reviewing the 2025 findings agree that Tennessee's trespass laws are among the strictest in the Southeast. Section 39-14-405 of the state code allows only limited exceptions for law enforcement, primarily when probable cause exists or when evidence is visible from a public vantage point. But probable cause can't exist without evidence, creating a perfect legal circle. In practical terms, this means hundreds of acres near Beech Creek remain perpetually out of reach, locked behind the presumption of innocence that shields every property owner. That's why the drone program is both innovative and controversial. It's one of the few tools that can legally cross those invisible lines. Aerial surveillance is permitted under FAA regulation as long as it doesn't interfere with air traffic or invade personal privacy. The footage can't be used in court without corroboration, but it can inform future warrant applications. In the Summer Wells search, that distinction matters. The 2025 team can't excavate, but they can point, providing coordinates where anomalies or structures appear. Their survey documented multiple areas worth review: a fenced lot with rusted farm machinery behind Horse Creek Park, a wooded patch south of the Comfort Inn with visible clearings, and 2 private drives leading into unregistered land parcels. None of these zones show direct evidence of criminal activity, yet all share the same feature: they sit just outside the legal reach of the 2021 operation. For investigators, the lesson is strategic. Missing person searches don't fail because evidence vanishes, they fail because access runs out. The "no trespassing" signs that guard rural properties aren't symbols of guilt, but they function as barriers to closure. They slow momentum, fracture coordination, and over time, allow nature to reclaim whatever lies beyond the gate. The drone team's findings have since been shared with local volunteers and legal advisors advocating for renewed cooperation with landowners. Whether that leads to new ground searches is uncertain. What is certain is that the Beech Creek map, as it exists in public records, is incomplete by law. The truth, whatever remains of it, may not be buried in the forest, but fenced within it. And so the paradox continues: the very laws designed to protect citizens also shield the unknown. Each sign reading "no trespassing" marks not just private property, but the edge of discovery itself. And when the real ground is locked away, another kind of space opens up, the digital one, where misinformation travels faster than any search team could ever move. When the drone operator reviewed his field footage, he added a brief but pointed comment: "The St. Clair thing is misinformation. It's incorrect. But it's on a million channels, spreading like a virus." That single sentence captures a problem that now defines nearly every high-profile true crime case: the replacement of verified fact with algorithmic fiction. The so-called St. Clair theory began in mid-2021, days after Summer Wells disappeared. A YouTube user claimed Candace Bly had been seen at the St. Clair gas station nearly 20 miles from Beech Creek. The claim was never supported by local footage, eyewitnesses, or law enforcement reports. Yet once uploaded, it multiplied. Other creators repeated it, blogs cited it, and within weeks the false location had replaced the real one in much of the online conversation. Why did it spread? Because it fit a narrative. The idea that Candace drove a long distance the day her daughter vanished added drama, motive, and suspicion. Viewers shared it not for accuracy, but for emotional payoff. And once a story satisfies emotion, evidence rarely recovers. By 2022, the error had calcified into common knowledge. Hundreds of comment threads referenced it as proof that Candace lied about her timeline. Even national podcasts repeated it without verification. The consequence was measurable. The real 5:30 p.m. gas station sighting, confirmed by locals and drone footage, was ignored. The timeline shifted outward, expanding the supposed window of opportunity by hours. That distortion didn't just misinform the public. It rewrote the psychological portrait of the mother at the center of the case. This is the core danger of viral misinformation in online true crime. Each fragment of false data spawns a chain reaction. A wrong location creates a wrong time. A wrong time creates a wrong motive. And soon the case being discussed is no longer the one investigators are trying to solve. In the Wells investigation, that chain replaced field evidence with speculation. Entire discussions focused on drive times that never occurred, phone pings that were misread, and witness sightings that could not exist if geography were correctly applied. The impact reaches beyond curiosity. Once the internet labels someone deceptive, that image becomes permanent. For Candace Bly, the St. Clair rumor solidified public hostility. Forums split between those convinced of guilt and those pleading for restraint. What might have remained a technical misunderstanding turned into a social trial. When police later clarified that the store in question was not St. Clair, few corrections went viral. The lie had already won the algorithm. This phenomenon isn't unique to Beech Creek. The Madeleine McCann case followed a similar path. Early reports misidentified the exact apartment where the child slept, leading to years of confusion about sightlines, entry points, and noise levels. Once that misprint entered online databases, every reconstruction that followed was built on a flawed map. The Asha degree disappearance in North Carolina suffered from another version of it, a viral rumor that police had recovered her backpack near a lake miles away, when in fact it was found beside Highway 18. Even after the correction, many viewers continued referencing the non-existent lake. Each distortion distracted attention from the few verifiable clues that could still be pursued. The mechanism is always the same. A small error meets large engagement, and the internet's reward system does the rest. Posts that confirm bias get shared, clarifications do not. In this environment, silence is not the enemy, volume is. Every repetition of a wrong claim drives legitimate investigators further from control of the narrative. Law enforcement agencies recognize this, but struggle to counter it. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation issued multiple updates, asking the public to rely only on official releases. Each post received a fraction of the attention that speculative content drew. In effect, the signal-to-noise ratio flipped. Accurate information circulated quietly, while conjecture became mainstream. For search teams on the ground, the cost was practical. Volunteers arrived at the wrong areas, guided by GPS coordinates lifted from YouTube maps. Drone pilots wasted battery time scanning locations that had no connection to the case. One volunteer later admitted, "We trusted the online map more than the sheriff's grid. It looked more convincing." The result was thousands of man-hours diverted by digital error. Psychologists who study misinformation call this narrative fixation, the human tendency to defend an early explanation even when it's disproven. In missing person cases, that fixation doesn't just warp understanding, it changes behavior. Viewers stop asking what happened and start deciding who to blame. In Beech Creek, the fixation on the false St. Clair stop created a feedback loop. Skepticism toward Candace fed more rumors, which in turn justified deeper skepticism. The investigation never stood a chance of escaping the echo. The ethical cost is harder to quantify but equally real. Every minute spent debating a false lead online is a minute not spent reviewing the topography, cell data, or search gap zones that might still yield progress. True crime communities began with curiosity, but over time, curiosity turned performative. What started as crowdsourced vigilance became a form of entertainment. The Wells case shows the tipping point clearly. When discussion generates more visibility than discovery, attention itself becomes the product. For professional investigators, the solution is slow but possible. verified geolocation data, timestamped imagery, and transparent chain of custody reports are now being released earlier in open cases to prevent misinformation from filling the void. But in cold investigations like Summer Wells's, that opportunity passed long ago. What remains is cleanup, the task of untangling 4 years of speculation to recover what was factual at the start. The lesson extends far beyond this valley. In the digital age, every missing child lives in two realities, the physical one mapped by search teams and the virtual one mapped by engagement algorithms. When those two maps diverge, truth loses coordinates. And so the most dangerous silence in Beech Creek was never from the woods. It was the silence of facts drowned out by noise. Amid that noise, a small group chose a different response, not to argue online, but to take their drones back into the forest. In the years since Summer Wells disappeared, one unexpected force has reshaped how missing person cases evolve. Not police, not journalists, but ordinary citizens with technology. What used to be a passive audience has become an active search network. The term investigators now use for it is citizen forensics, the collective, often decentralized, effort of people using drones, maps, AI imaging, and open data to re-examine what official investigations left behind. This shift didn't begin with Beech Creek, but the Wells case made it visible. After the first year with no arrest and no physical trace, the official search effort slowed. In that void, civilians began to organize. Some analyzed police statements, others reviewed terrain maps, and a few, like the 2025 drone team, returned physically to the landscape itself. Their advantage wasn't authority, it was mobility. Without waiting for warrants or departmental approval, they could film, map, and post updates in real time. That speed matters. When professional teams operate, they move carefully under protocol. Each photograph and coordinate must be logged for evidentiary standards. Civilians, however, work in the open. Their footage can circulate within hours, triggering new sets of eyes, sometimes tens of thousands, to analyze and compare. In the Wells search, this meant people from other states could pause drone videos, mark anomalies, and relay observations back to the field team. In one instance, a viewer identified the reflection of a second structure near Little Horse Creek that hadn't been noted in the pilot's notes. It turned out to be an empty shed, but the principle stood. A collective can process data faster than any single investigator. Yet the same openness that fuels progress also breeds risk. Citizen investigators lack legal boundaries, which means every exploration walks a thin line between discovery and trespass. Tennessee's private property laws, among the strictest in the region, make even well-intentioned searches vulnerable to prosecution. In 2023, a separate volunteer group was briefly detained after entering gated land near the Beech Creek Community Center without permission. They were released with a warning, but the message was clear: intent doesn't override law. Security and personal safety are other concerns. Many citizen searchers operate alone in remote areas with unstable ground, water hazards, or wildlife. Others face online threats. As digital audiences grow, so do the conflicts within them. True crime communities are divided. Admiration for persistence collides with accusations of exploitation. Civilian investigators who post footage often receive both praise and harassment, sometimes from the same viewers. In the Summer Wells investigation, the drone operators maintained a careful neutrality. Their videos included disclaimers: "We're not assigning guilt. We're documenting geography." That restraint became part of their credibility. They filled a vacuum without trying to replace law enforcement. Instead of claiming to solve the case, they reframed it, showing how much terrain remained unsearched and how many details were lost beneath speculation. This open-source search model has now appeared in other major cases. During the Gabby Petito investigation in 2021, civilian analysts on Reddit and TikTok tracked her last known movements through geotagged posts, eventually locating her van in Wyoming before the FBI arrived. In the Idaho 4 homicides of 2022, online sleuths used satellite imagery to identify camera angles near the crime scene, some of which were later confirmed in court. These examples demonstrate the potential of collective intelligence, but they also reveal its volatility. In both cases, innocent individuals were wrongly accused before evidence corrected the narrative. The line between help and harm remains dangerously thin. In Beech Creek, the balance leaned toward help. The drone footage didn't introduce new suspects or sensational claims. It restored focus to verifiable data, roads, coordinates, distances. It replaced online drama with topography. That difference matters. In a digital ecosystem where rumor spreads faster than correction, disciplined civilian investigators can serve as a stabilizing force, bringing the conversation back to measurable reality. Still, there's a limit that technology cannot cross. Drones, GPS, and satellite overlays can map surfaces, but they can't interpret human behavior. They can't determine intent or motive. Civilian teams can document, but not subpoena. They can analyze, but not prosecute. Without official integration, their findings remain advisory, valuable but not binding. For law enforcement, this presents both opportunity and caution. Useful data from civilians must be verified, replicated, and stripped of bias before it can enter the official record. What the Wells case illustrates is a new phase in modern investigation, one where the boundary between public and professional inquiry has collapsed. Police no longer operate in isolation. Every move is mirrored, sometimes corrected, by digital observers. And for better or worse, that transparency changes how justice is pursued. The drone team's quiet persistence stands as the productive face of this new era. They worked within limits, documented without accusation, and left a record that future investigators can build on. Whether or not their footage ever leads to resolution, it redefines what it means to keep looking. In an environment saturated with opinion, they provided something rare: observation. Yet even as technology can fly higher than the trees, there are still places its lens can't reach, the blind zones where truth waits in silence. For all the precision of its mapping, the 2025 drone footage has one unavoidable limitation: it shows only what sunlight touches. Every frame is an aerial slice of the surface, nothing more. What lies beneath the tree canopy, under the clay, or inside the abandoned wells remains unseen. In Beech Creek, those hidden layers may hold more truth than anything visible from above. The terrain of rural eastern Tennessee works against visibility. Even in late autumn, the trees form a roof thick enough to block much of the ground from aerial view. Beneath that canopy, shrubs and vines knit together, forming natural camouflage. In the drone's footage, entire clearings disappear when viewed from a slightly higher altitude, erased by shadow. That same effect conceals smaller objects: clothing, shoes, bones, even toys. A single layer of leaves or soil can flatten everything into the same uniform brown. Search experts call this the vertical limitation. What a drone can't penetrate, a searcher must physically disturb. But in Beech Creek, disturbing the ground isn't simple. The soil is Appalachian clay, dense and moisture-heavy. It holds water after rain, forming a compact crust that seals whatever lies beneath. When it dries, it hardens like concrete. When wet, it behaves like glue. Anything lightweight, fabric, paper, plastic, sinks quickly and becomes part of the sediment layer. In forensic terms, the region has a high absorption rate, meaning small items vanish faster than decomposition can expose them. That process accelerates under the area's humidity. The Appalachian microclimate combines high rainfall with limited sunlight, creating a natural preservation chamber. Organic matter decomposes unevenly, soft tissue disappears, but bone can remain intact for decades. The problem is visibility. Bones under heavy vegetation don't fluoresce under thermal scans or UV light. Even cadaver dogs, effective in open air, lose scent trails within minutes once water saturates the soil. Studies from the University of Tennessee's Anthropological Research Facility in Knoxville show that human remains in similar conditions can become completely covered by soil and leaf litter in less than a year, even without deliberate burial. If Summer Wells never left the Ben Hill property, this is where the logic leads. She could still be within a radius of a few hundred meters, concealed not by distance, but by nature itself. Not hidden, simply unseen. Searchers in 2021 reported that dense thickets and steep drops made it impossible to grid the property completely. 4 years later, those same areas are even harder to reach, their boundaries consumed by new growth. Without excavation, detection is nearly impossible. The drone team recognized this limitation. Their footage mapped canopy density, identifying where light failed to reach the ground. Some of the darkest spots were within walking distance of the well's home. Drainage depressions, collapsed root systems, and sections of the creek bank where erosion had created small caves. These aren't locations a camera can explore, only a shovel or probe. In total, roughly 20% of the mapped area registered as unobservable, meaning even the best imaging technology could not confirm what existed below the surface. Subsurface features complicate the picture further. Many rural Tennessee properties contain old wells, cisterns, or septic tanks sealed decades ago. Some are recorded, others are not. From the air, these structures resemble normal terrain. Their openings are covered by vegetation or thin metal sheets, easily overlooked. In 2022, local authorities cataloged over 200 unregistered wells across Hawkins County. If even one of those sits near Ben Hill or Horse Creek, it represents a potential blind spot no drone can resolve. Then there are the root systems. Mature Appalachian oaks and maples develop roots that twist horizontally near the surface, creating natural voids underneath. When soil shifts, these voids become traps. Small objects roll inward and are covered by fresh leaf fall. After months, the forest floor restores its symmetry, smooth, untouched, and deceiving. It's a phenomenon that has confounded recovery teams in multiple cases across the region. The sum of these conditions explains why searched remains such a fragile word in Beech Creek. Technology can narrow the field, but it can't erase uncertainty. A drone can locate anomalies, but it can't tell whether a shadow hides a hollow or just damp soil. Even ground-penetrating radar struggles here. The mineral composition of Appalachian clay reflects signal noise, blurring readings. Each method, no matter how advanced, hits the same obstacle. The land absorbs everything, sight, sound, and evidence alike. For investigators, that means the margin of error stays permanent. Every nothing found must carry an asterisk within current visibility limits. The drone team's work makes those limits measurable but not eliminable. They've mapped the gaps but can't fill them. It's possible, even likely, that some trace, however small, remains within that 500-meter radius around Ben Hill Road, but the odds of recovery decrease each year as nature reclaims ground. Flooding reshapes creek paths. Sediment layers add new surfaces. A toy left in 2021 might now be a foot below today's soil line. Evidence doesn't just vanish, it sinks. That's why the phrase, "what the drone didn't see," is as important as what it did. The unseen isn't void, it's potential. The places untouched by camera or boot remain the only frontier where certainty might still exist. And in that empty space, where no one has seen anything, people are reminded of the one thing that still survives every search and every silence: hope. By the time the 2025 drone team packed up their equipment, they hadn't uncovered a single piece of physical evidence tied to Summer Wells. No clothing, no personal object, no trace that could be logged into a case file. Yet what they achieved may prove just as valuable. Their work restored clarity where years of speculation had blurred the truth. It showed that justice doesn't end when the paperwork stops. It simply waits for the next person willing to keep looking. 4 years after the disappearance, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation still lists the case as active and ongoing. The official reward for credible information remains in place: $4,000 for any lead that leads to recovery or arrest. In early 2025, the TBI released an age-progressed image of Summer Wells, showing what she might look like at 9 years old. The photo, created by forensic artists using family reference data, was distributed through state and national missing child networks. It renewed media attention and reopened discussion, particularly after the drone footage reminded the public how many physical locations remain unchecked. Investigators continue to encourage anyone with knowledge to contact 1-800-TBI-FND, the same hotline established in 2021. Calls still come in, fewer now, but steady. Agents confirm that every credible tip is logged and reviewed, though most yield no actionable result. Even so, each reminder that the line is open signals an important truth. The case isn't cold, it's paused, waiting for the next verifiable fact. That distinction between speculation and fact is the first lesson the Beech Creek search offers. The investigation's progress hasn't been measured by theories or online debates, but by data, coordinates, timestamps, satellite overlays. In an era where emotion often outpaces evidence, this search proves that truth depends on documentation. Without it, the most compelling narrative means nothing. The second lesson is quieter, but harder to practice. Silence is not surrender. When the media cycle moves on, the absence of headlines doesn't mean the absence of progress. Most of the work that sustains long-term investigations happens out of view. Field notes, data comparisons, forensic cross-checks. The 2025 drone mission stands as a symbol of that patience. The pilots didn't promise breakthroughs, they delivered visibility. Their contribution reminds investigators, journalists, and citizens alike that persistence itself can reopen doors long thought sealed. The third lesson reaches beyond this single case. Technology doesn't replace human determination, it extends it. Drones, mapping software, and AI imaging can't feel compassion or suspicion, but they can see where the human eye can't. They can archive landscapes before weather erases them. In Beech Creek, technology turned what was once too late into still possible. The future of search work, and perhaps of justice, lies in that intersection between endurance and innovation. For the Wells family, the question of closure remains unresolved. Both parents have spoken publicly, maintaining their innocence and continuing to plead for answers. Public opinion remains divided, but the drone team's findings gently shifted focus away from accusation and back toward geography. The narrative moved from who to where, from conflict to context. That reorientation may be the investigation's most practical legacy. It returns the search to the ground, to coordinates rather than commentary. Every case like this carries two timelines. The first is chronological, what happened, when, and where. The second is emotional, how long a community chooses to care. Beech Creek shows that those timelines don't have to end together. Even without discovery, continued effort redefines loss as duty. By 2025, Beech Creek had changed physically but not symbolically. The same ridges, creeks, and fields still hold their silence. Yet they no longer stand unexamined. Each new survey, each corrected map, reduces the size of the unknown. Justice, in its purest form, isn't always the discovery of guilt. Sometimes it's the disciplined refusal to forget. The 2025 search proved that refusal. It documented what remains unsearched, corrected what was misunderstood, and left a clear trail for whoever comes next. The work doesn't guarantee resolution, but it guarantees memory, and in a case built on silence, memory is a form of resistance. Somewhere in those hills, the wind still moves through the trees above Ben Hill Road, carrying the echoes of the first calls that June evening. The searchers have changed, the tools have evolved, but the purpose hasn't. Somewhere in those hills, silence still speaks. And until someone listens, the search isn't over,